Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here today with part 1 of the Queen Macherie character review. Now, before we even get started, let's address the obvious elephant in the room. Yes, she is an Earth unit being released in the midst of a massive wind meta and global, and we have Final Fantasy Tactics and Final Fantasy 13 collaborations on the horizon, so viz-wise, we're probably hoarding just a little bit. So the question, should I pull her, is a very different one than is the character good? So I'm going to hopefully try to segregate those two. Now, the review breakdown, I will do this again in 3 parts, but they should happen relatively quickly this time. Part 1, just a general stat overview. I have a bit in here about crit hit rate and crit avoidance, which is kind of new here. Finishing off the report card. Part 2 and 3, pretty standard. It's going to be an ability, a job overview, her auto prioritization skill-wise, the TMR, and then really about min-maxing her in part 3 with the Espers, the weapons, and trust stones. So kicking things off, she's a brand new Earth unit, as we mentioned. They gave her the unique job of Steeled Queen, with Arithmetician and Time Mage as those 2 sub-jobs. She equips maces and hats, cloths, and accessories, the move of 3 and jump of 1. She is a 100 cost unit. Now, resistance-wise, she actually starts off pretty well, with both 15% to slash and missile, while also having 5% to magic, all, we'll say, the 3 most popular attack types in the game. She's neutral to strike, with -10 being the only negative resistance to pierce, which obviously you do want to watch out for. Now, she is a 97 faith unit because she is a spellcaster, so she will be susceptible to these status ailments, and the ones that she has resistances to, 50% to berserk and paralysis, both of which actually are really hurtful status ailments, but you just don't see them as popularly nowadays. So although they're good resistances, probably not going to help her anytime soon in the meta that we're currently seeing. 10% to slow is certainly nice as well. Now, as we segue into the stat analysis, base stat-wise, right in the middle to the lower end of things. If you're looking at the list here on the right, she is amidst some of her supports like Halloween Leela and Velis, some other spellcasters like More the Merrier, and right above the base HP of a lot of the Evasion units. So overall, it does skew a little bit on the lower side, but she does have some other things in her kit to increase her overall survivability. The story obviously doesn't end there. Now, magic-wise, she is a top 5 magic, or at least base magic unit in the game. This is super important, where magic boosting things will scale really nicely off of this stat. As we continue on, agility-wise, basically straight average. She is essentially right in the middle of the pack for agility, totally fine in that regard. It's certainly not a deficiency overall. Now, dexterity, this is where she does skew far lower than many of the other units. This will obviously affect her critical hit rate, which we'll see in a second, but overall doesn't hurt her accuracy too much, because when we look at the luck side of things, she actually is relatively well above average for base luck, being in the top 25 of all units here. So when we add that all together, comparing her base stats to where the other UR units are in the game, she obviously shines from the magic and luck perspective, as we just saw, right in the middle of the pack, we'll say, for agility and dexterity. And when you add up the board nodes and the mastery abilities, things of that nature, she does have some relative strengths and weaknesses compared to where the other characters end up. They actually do a good job giving her some extra agility on the board here to increase her agility relative to other UR units, but she does kind of take steps back into dexterity and HP. Now, the HP is a little bit of an anomaly because I have tanks in here as well, who are obviously way almost outliers above what DPS normally have for HP. But when you compare in total where her stats derive from, they give her 10 agility on the board here. Most units only get 6 to 8, so they give her a little bit of extra love there for a total agility of 66. But overall, stat-wise, she's not in a bad place. It certainly does not hamper her. Now, we look at the crit hit and crit avoid. This is a new section I've built out here for my reviews going forward. Critical hit rate scales entirely off your dexterity stat. So as we saw, her base dexterity and, in essence, her total dexterity is low enough that her innate critical hit rate is definitely on the lower side of things. Now, if you're comparing her, at least percentage-wise, to some of the people nearby, if you want to get a better idea of how often you see these characters crit hit, Macherie will kind of be similar. And then from the crit avoidance standpoint, it scales entirely off of your luck stat only. And again, she's above average in that regard. So when it comes to innate critical avoidance rate, she does skew higher overall, which is a nice aspect of her overall survivability. If anyone's curious about these two stats, they both scale basically linearly, meaning whenever you add dexterity or luck, you basically get equal returns no matter what your luck or dexterity stat is. Now, as we continue on to the accuracy side of things, 2 lines here. One of them is your innate accuracy with your mastery ability, with your dexterity and your luck stats. The green line is if you start including passives, meaning accuracy boosting passives, luck boosting passives. Now, innately, she does end up a little bit above average, but her main passive, which you will have equipped 90% of the time, does have 25% accuracy on it. So when you add that into it, she does actually skew on the higher side of things for total accuracy. If you're looking at innate accuracy, she's right around that 45 out of the 117. And if you're doing with passives, she's a top 25 most accurate unit. So really good from that regard. From evasion, she is just on the cusp of what you would consider an evade unit. Any lower than that, you probably wouldn't dodge anything. If you're looking at her evasion rates, I don't think you would consider any of these characters around her evade units, although if you're going against a really inaccurate comp and you have your party geared for high maximum evasion, she certainly will dodge one or two against those less accurate characters, and being as part of the Earth comp, who is an evasion-centric element, she certainly will benefit from some of those vision cards. Which brings us finally to the overall report card. Now, effective HP is, it's about a C, and it's the same for the physical and magical for a couple reasons. Number one, resistance-wise, she has some good positive ones to the more notorious physical damage types, but she does not have any innate defense or spirit, and no passives to boost either of them either, so she's kind of ambivalent to magic and physical in that regard. She does have an innate 10 AoE resistance and a re-raise ability, which certainly helps her overall survivability. When we look at the primary stat, going with a B+ here, she does not have any passives to boost it or buffs to boost it, so she does stay a little bit limited with where her magic stat is from the start of the battle, but that's not always reflective of damage, obviously. She's got 40 spirit penetration on the passive. She's got an ability that adds another 50 temporarily for that attack to get her up to 90 on that single attack. She's got a 25 spirit imperil on her low AP ability and a 38% earth imperil on the limit break. So overall damage-wise, the primary stat obviously doesn't tell the whole story. Agility-wise, she ends up at that C, where you saw base agility, she's right in the middle. Even total stat-wise, she's still right about the average. She does have haste on the time mage sub, but it is a very tricky to make her cast it on herself, so I would not see a significant amount of upside there from the agility perspective. Now, accuracy, we saw she does skew higher, top 25 unit. I am going to give her a B+ here. She does actually have an ability that also adds a 30% hit chance, which is supremely awesome. Overall, not really hurting for accuracy in that regard. Evasion, straight C as we saw. Movement, I'm also giving a C. She's got nothing to increase her move or jump, totally fine. Passives, I'm going with a C+, actually. She has one really great passive, but the rest of them are really just for build tweaking. They don't really do anything to like accentuate her as a character. So overall, a little lackluster, but the one passive she has is genuinely really awesome. Counter ability wise, I am going a B- here. It's not that they're bad, they're all appropriately good, and actually all three of them have some decent value. There's just really nothing incredibly unique about any of them. Which brings us to her overall kit. I'm giving her a B here. There's definitely some deficiencies you're going to want to try to hedge against, some places where it really doesn't work well, and some where it does. We'll obviously go through that more in depth in part 2, but the overall grade, I'm giving her a B+. She actually is a pretty good unit in a vacuum, obviously not considering things like the current meta and whatnot. But Earth is sorely missing for a magic caster, and she does that actually very well. It'll give your party some vision card flexibility, which is really nice. And although she may not shine right now, I do think she has the skills to compete with a variety of different metas over time. But that's the part 1 review in a nutshell for right now. I'll be having part 2 and part 3 out very shortly. I actually already have her at 120 as of today, so I can finally start testing her against some of those high-level Guild War comps to really stress test and see how the abilities function when implemented properly. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll talk to you all soon.